Welcome into WeAreSC. Welcome into Four Downs. This is Erik McKinney, joined by Greg Katz. Greg, we are previewing-ish the national championship game, but we're going to tie in USC football and all of that with it too. So Four Downs, first down, we always talk leading off with the USC offense. We've got the 2023 season rear view mirror. Now we're into sort of the off season. Gonna feel like a long way before that first kickoff. But right now, at sort of the very beginning of the off season, workouts starting on Monday as all the early enrollees get here onto campus. Your sort of one thing, biggest point of emphasis, I guess, for that USC offense as we get into the offseason or even through the offseason, but in that kind of transition 23 to the 24 season.
Well, I don't think it's any great shock offensively. They've got to find a suitable backup quarterback, in my opinion, for Miller Moss. No matter how you get along around it, nothing against Jensen, his backup, but you know what? In this game of football, the way an SC wants to pass the ball and that sort of stuff, I thought Miller Moss showed that he can do it. He can definitely do it, but it's the game. It's a violent game, and he could get taken out on any play. And what are they left with? Now, I don't know what's going to happen with Maeva from UNLV, whether the second team, all Mountain West Conference quarterback is going to end up at SC, but they need to plug that hole there. I don't care how much they work out in the summer. I usually don't get too caught up. I get more caught up with linemen than I do quarterbacks at SC, but this is an issue. No doubt about it. In my mind, it is.
I'm going to skip that. I'm going to go to what I thought you would go with, which is that offensive line. Now, if you look at numbers, USC's got to figure out some wide receiver stuff. Their numbers are super low at receiver, just in terms of what you want to do. But it's finally, it feels like the offensive line at USC has enough numbers of capable bodies. Big news that Jonah Monheim is returning. That's huge for that group. But I think they need to kind of get a giddy up on what does that line look like for 2024. What we saw last year in 2023, you brought in the two transfers, Jarrett Kingston and Michael Tarquin, and they were there in the spring. Kingston kind of dealing with some injury stuff, but you had Michael Tarquin at left tackle, Jonah Monheim at right for the whole spring. And then it kind of came out right before fall camp. We don't really like that. We're going to shuffle this around. Emmanuel Prenion came in after spring. You're trying to put all these bodies at different spots. Prenion played on one side on the right side at Wyoming. Now he's on the left side. Kingston had been on the left side. He's on the right side. And we asked, quite a bit going into the season, is this shuffling? Is this how you want it to be? Do you want the line to look like this? And then we kind of got the answer through the year, right? Where that line is getting pushed around and it's not really clicking. They're not really figuring out. They had to make a change. I think for that Utah game, at that point on that right side, and that felt like, man, going back to spring, was that really what you wanted? How much time did you get to spend with new bodies at those places and having that line gel? I think that's key really early. And what's interesting is the guy who comes back that's big is Jonah Monheim. And so his biggest skill might be that he can play all five spots on the line, but do you want it to be where, okay, is he a center? Is he going to go back to the left? Is he going to go all the way to the right? Does he play guard where that probably is his position in the NFL, and certainly would want to put that on tape, would want to play guard extensively rather than just here and there like he's done during his career. So I think finding a spot for him, Gino Quinone is another guy whose probably biggest skill is that he can play all three spots on the interior. But do you want to spend all spring moving guys around, or do you want to try to lock them in and get them going? You've got a couple young guys in Elijah Page, Lonnie Noah, those types of players. Is there is there someone out there in the transfer portal still that you can land in January that can play in the spring with you? I think that for me is key because it's clear you want that versatility, right? A guy who could play left tackle and right guard, that helps you out a lot when injuries come because it's a, like you said, violent game on the offensive line, especially. It's a when injuries happen thing. It's not if. At some point, you're moving someone around and trying to plug holes. So that's it for me right now. And you don't need to have it right now, but I think there needs to maybe feel like more urgency to get that group locked up in front of a new quarterback for this schedule that you're going to face. I don't know that you need to say, first day of spring, this is the starting lineup and this is who we have. But right, that like giddy up and let's get that figured out. That feels to me like a priority for this group because you've got a lot of bodies, you've got a lot of capable bodies, a lot of freshmen who I think are going to make pretty significant jumps this offseason. So that's absolutely going to be something that I have an eye on during the spring, how that shakes out, where those guys land, and if that's kind of a permanent spot for them in the fall.
Yeah, but I'll tell you, I thought that when you look at it, when Riley first came to USC, people were concerned about the offensive line, and he made a very astute comment. He says, "You know what? They're experienced players. That's the one." And then that did show for most of the season that got him along. Of course, last year, it was a mishmash of, this guy from this transfer portal, this guy, they're out of position of where they played at their previous school, as you pointed out. But, I look at it and I think the idea of these players coming from high school and participating in spring ball is a huge deal. The one I'm keeping an eye on is Zandamela from Clearwater, Florida, center. From the reports that I've read, I've watched him on film. Some think he's the best interior freshman in the country, and he's quite bright. He's very mature. He's lived on his own for a while, and going to Clearwater Academy. So he's someone there. I think that another one you pointed out, I think was absolutely correctly, is Gino Quinones. I mean, if he could handle the center position, if he doesn't, he's going to end up being a guard. And the point would be is if, Elijah Page did not embarrass himself per se in the Holiday Bowl. And so he got that start. Now, that's one thing to play, in the Holiday Bowl as it is to open the season in Las Vegas against LSU, which will have a new offense and defensive coordinator. He pretty much wiped out his coaching staff for the most part. He doesn't play games. He did the same thing at Notre Dame with his defensive coordinator. So he means business. But I think that this spring, when we see Quinones back and we see Zandamela, we'll get a shot at center. I'm sure he will. I think it's asking a little too much to think that a freshman can handle being a center. I don't think he expecting to make the line calls, but certainly Monheim could. And if he's right next to Zandamela, that's a bonus. But I think that the offensive line will be okay. But they've got to make sure they slot these guys in the right spot, and we'll find out.
And I think a big key, that 2022 team was buoyed so much by how veteran that line was and how much football those guys had played together. They weren't perfect, but boy, that was a great start. If Lincoln Riley coming into a program that was as bad as that USC program was in terms of being set up kind of for the future, if you could only get one spot with that kind of veteran leadership, you'd pick the offensive line. When you're bringing in Caleb Williams, that's where you'd start as the offensive line. This group feels like, again, it's ifs, but with Page coming back, Emmanuel Perrion, if Quinones is at center and then some kind of Mason Murphy and Jonah Monheim on the right side, again, that's an if. You can move a lot of those guys around in and out or whatever, but those are five guys that have played together, been at USC together. It's not, boy, we hope this Washington State film and Florida film and all of that can come together and figure stuff out on the fly in year one. So I think that's where you look at this offensive line potentially taking a big step forward from this last group, even though you're losing a couple veteran guys who had played a lot of football from that 2023 group. That's for me, that's it, right? You still need some bodies. You're wondering, it's kind of a reset at running back. The wide receiver position is sort of not decimated in terms of numbers of guys leaving NFL and transfer portal, but boy, the top end talent there is outstanding at this point. So questions there, but the key for me is that offensive line and getting it shored up quickly where they really can be the leaders during spring ball, during the summer conditioning, all of that kind of stuff into fall camp. Let's go to second down. We're going to flip things, and that's the same kind of look. USC defense, the thing that jumps out to you, let's get this done now, or the biggest key kind of transitioning from last year to this year?
Well, I think you could pick any of the spots, the down linemen, the linebackers, the secondary. It's all going to be changed around. But I think the guys coming in the secondary from UCLA are going to make a difference because they know the system already. So they're not going to have to relearn anything. But I think the area that I'm most concerned about, especially going into the Big Ten, is the inside linebackers. I'm very concerned about the inside linebackers. And looking at Lynn's system, we would call them defensive ends. He calls them, I think, outside linebackers. Because I was going over kind of what their setup was on the what we call in the press box, the flip chart, where they list all the positions. And I was looking at it, and it's a lot of it is going to be new, but I look at that inside linebacker spot, and of course they lost some players there, for whatever reason. Tackett Curtis is gone. I don't know how much of a big loss that's going to be. Maybe in a new system it would be a big loss. I don't know. But you look at what they're going to have to go up against. You look at the down linemen, and you just wonder, are they going to be able to withstand week after week? A lot of people would debate me and say, well, okay, Indiana isn't that good, and Rutgers isn't that good. A lot of those teams aren't that good because they don't have the skill players that Ohio State has or Michigan. But for interior lineman wise, they might be pretty physical. And that constant pounding and pounding and pounding, how SC can be able to keep up with that pounding. They'll still outscore people, probably in the Indianas and maybe the Rutgers. Maryland's not going to have their quarterback. So they get a break there. But when I look at it in totality, I thought in the Holiday Bowl there was a glimpse of hope with the secondary. It was just the way they were tackling. They didn't make a lot of big time mistakes that we had seen under the tutorship of Dante Williams. I'm not pointing the finger, but he was the guy in charge basically. So we're going to find out, is Mason Cobb going to be able to be the man under Lynn and under a new linebacker coach? Where does Gentry fit in? I don't know where Gentry fits in. Maybe they'll say he's out of position for his weight. We've gone through this before with him. So my thing is, I'm going to start off with the middle linebacker position because I know when you play Michigan and Ohio State, the first thing they're going to do is they're going to test the inside, the front seven. And you better be able to, if you can't stop them in the front line, you better have somebody who can sit there and scrape and get into those holes and hold your own, so to speak.
Yeah, I'm gonna go up the chain. I'm just gonna start at Danton Lynn, and that is the key for me. How quickly can you teach this scheme? Because it took Alex Grinch more than 2 years, right? He was still, it seemed like they were still trying to learn it and trying to understand what was happening. What you hear about Dan Lynn from the UCLA players when you go back and read interviews and watch stuff from the players talking about Danton Lynn when he was doing install and when he first got to UCLA, they really talked about how good he was at getting them to understand what was going on, what he wanted, what to do, all of that, how quickly he could implement that. That's going to be key. That's going to be the absolute key. How fast is this defense playing early in spring? How quickly do they get it to where you can see it on the field? Because that's what stuck out so much about the Holiday Bowl is that it looked like the defense knew what they were doing. They were playing with confidence. They knew that they could be here and make this tackle and cover this guy and do all of that stuff. And again, it wasn't perfect. It wasn't number one in the nation defense or anything like that. But the step forward from what we have seen for years and years and years. I mean, this is you're going back. If you want to find a top 40 USC defense, just top 40 in a full season, it's 2016, a top 25 defense at USC. You're going back to 2013. And then the years since then, it's not like they've been 41 or 42. I mean, it's 75, it's 88, it's 106, it's 120. Like that's the defense that we've seen. And that's the defense that UCLA had played until Danton Lynn came in and kind of fixed things, righted the ship. And we're going to see how much of that was that scheduled they played, plus the front seven he inherited, the veteran players, all of that kind of stuff were all definite pluses for him at UCLA. But again, when you hear the players talk about how he installed it, how he taught it, I think this guy can teach football. And that's what this side of the ball needs. And that's the first thing. That is the first thing to implement is get this down, play with confidence, understand what you're doing. And I think this group can do that. And if you just play competent defense, boy, are you starting off with a head start based on what we've seen the last few years. So for me, it's Lynn. And I think hand in hand with that is Lincoln Riley's comment. We are going to do right when a decision has to be made, we're going defense. We're doing everything we can to help the defense. What does that look like? How quickly does that kind of, how quickly does USC reap the benefits of that on that side of the ball? And really how much buy-in is there from the entire program on getting that defense going and going quickly? Because that 1 year turnaround at UCLA, again, I mentioned everything that went into that. That UCLA 2023 schedule is not the USC 2024 schedule in terms of who they're playing. But the expectation is going to be close on that 1 year turnaround and where USC can go. And that's got to start right now. I mean, it's got to start weeks ago, but once that, the winter conditioning and all of that really gets going, it's time to start working on that side of the ball.
What I think is fascinating, Erik, is I think because you have a new coaching staff, and especially, obviously on the defensive side, it'll be fascinating to me to see who gets their positions changed, who gets the opportunity that they hadn't gotten in the last defense. We might be surprised who the starting 11 is. I mean, I'm not predicting that Bear Alexander isn't going to start, inside tackle. But you got a lot of new guys coming in. You got a lot of guys that got a taste of it in the Holiday Bowl. And what is the perspective of the new coaches? What are they going to be looking for? They're going to go in with an open mind. They're going to go, okay, last season didn't work, so we're gonna erase the board here, the whiteboard, and we're gonna start putting some markers on there with new guys. So to me, that's what's really intriguing about this particular spring ball that's coming up. Who's gonna, we talk about the offensive line, but the defense in general, it's going to be fascinating to see it. I think this spring game will be really important to see just guys in the positions they're in. Unless Lincoln Riley does something that he hasn't done and lets the media come in and watch an actual practice, except for 15 minutes of jumping jacks, and let's make sure we don't pull our hamstring. I mean, that's where it's important for us to see, but that's another conversation for another time.
No, the fresh eyes looking at the defense, right? Hey, this guy can really play, and maybe he had done something early in his career with a different defensive coordinator where it was like, I can't trust that guy. But yeah, someone else comes in, sees things differently, and you always have guys that kind of jump up unexpectedly when that happens. All right, third down, we're gonna go and we'll take a look at this national championship game. a tiny bit of interest from USC fans as the Trojans play both of these teams next year. I mean, I can't remember. I mean, I'm sure it's happened before, but certainly not coming to me off the top of my head when a team has played both the teams in the title game. I'd assume somebody played those SEC teams when they met in the championship game, but can't happen a lot. I think it'll be the first time since that Alabama dog walking entrance that USC will play the reigning national
Oh, do
champion.
we have to go
So
there? That was
SC
one.
definitely getting them next year. So we're gonna go to third down on this, and as always, third down is thanks to our friends at Prize Picks. Prize Picks, the simplest form of real money daily fantasy sports, pits you against the numbers. Whether you're a fantasy sports nut or a casual fan looking to add some excitement to the games, Prize Picks is the perfect game for you. So you go to Prize Picks, use code SC for a first deposit match up to $100. Choose between 2 to 6 players. You can win 25 times your money on any entry. Again, go to Prize Picks, use promo code SC to get a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 on your first deposit. Greg, I went with 3 on this one, and offense. I went offense. I don't know, Michigan doesn't want that. Michigan, I assume, will want to keep things low scoring, but to me, I think Washington has a good shot in this one. I like the Huskies in this one. So I went Michael Penix, Washington quarterback, more than 300.5 passing yards. So need 301 passing yards for Michael Penix. I also think Michigan can run it against that Washington defense. Blake Corum, 101.5 rushing yards, more on that. And then Jalen Polk was the one Washington receiver. All 3 of them were listed on there. Jalen Polk, who went well over 100 against Texas at 57 and a half. More on that. I think he's a guy that can surprise you a little bit with so much attention on Roma Odunze, so much attention on Jalen McMillan. Jalen Polk is absolutely a guy who can show up big in that game. But for me, what stood out in the numbers and why I think Washington's got a good shot, Michigan's defense outstanding this year. I mean, I'm not going to argue how good they were. That pass defense, though, has not seen this Washington offense, and I think maybe, and what became pretty clear for me at least, is that nationally, and specifically when it comes to, I think, the Heisman voting, and these guys, the players are not in that, the coaches are not in that. They're going to watch film, they understand what's going on, but I don't know how much the nation knew about this Michael Penix this year and this Washington passing attack. It is outstanding. And when you look at Michigan, yeah, they finished number 2 in the country in pass defense. They lead the nation. They've given up 7 touchdown passes all season. The ranks of the passing offenses Michigan has faced this year, and this is again because all this ties into Big Ten and Michigan, Washington, 2 teams on the USC schedule, and Michigan played a bunch of teams this year that USC is going to face down the line. These passing attacks, 130, 129, 127, 126, 123, 106, 98. There's 2 teams, 2 passing attacks in the top 50 that Michigan played this year. Washington, number one in the nation in passing. I know Michigan's going to grind it out, and JJ McCarthy can do some stuff to do too. That sticks out to me though, in terms of what Michael Penix and these receivers can do. Even against Ohio State, and I know how good those wide receivers are. I think these Washington receivers are a little bit better as a group and as a passing attack.
Well, that's what they do. I mean, they've done it to everyone, but a couple of things from my perspective, keep in mind, they've had very small margins of victory in their games.
Mm-hmm.
Last, I don't know if it's 7 games, 8 games,
I think
something.
it's like 10 in a row.
I thought it was 10, but I didn't want to make an idiot out of myself, which isn't hard to do.
Yeah, say 40, but it's big. I think it's double digits. Yeah, 10.
So the law of averages just on that would say that, you're due. That doesn't mean it's going to happen, but you could say they're due. The thing about it is, I think Michigan's going to win. I think this Michigan team is really together as a group. They can physically get after it. Now, I think that Washington may be surprising to a lot of people that their offensive line is as good as it is, but the Michigan defense could get to Penix. They could get him. He's probably will run more in this game than he would run in all the other games because this is the last game. So he's not going to save himself for the next game and be careful. They're going to need to move the chain. So I think he's going to be more elusive than maybe he's shown in the past. But I think that Michigan, their only real weakness to me is their special teams, and they really looked lousy last week. So I'll say that if they improve 50%, that might be enough. I don't know. But I think that they're going to get to Penix in the front. And we don't know the real condition of Johnson at running back for, he even said, I'm not going to be at 100%. Now, he's obviously proven that he can handle pain. I mean, until he was actually really, racked up there at the end and they had to cart him out. But it's hard to conceive that in 1 week, the guy could, all of a sudden, have a miracle that he's running the 40 and 4.3.
Mhm.
But I think that when it's all said and done, Michigan is going to be, I think, judged on the three categories that you presented about yardage. I say more on all three of those categories. I mean, it'd be foolish to think that Penix isn't going to throw for 300 yards. Why would he suddenly not be able to do that? Because that's what they do. But that doesn't mean he's not going to throw interceptions. It's possible. And in a game like this, which is this, it is the epitome of college football on Monday night. It's the epitome. There is no experience unless you've been in the game before. Michigan has been in the game at some levels. So they have an idea what can happen. They could lose, whatever. Washington's never been in this position. It only takes just a little bit of a hesitation of confidence, and it can really upset the apple cart. I'm not saying that will happen, but it could happen because you just can't simulate it. So
Yeah.
I think it's going to be a really fascinating championship game. And one thing to remember, before I forget about it, SC is going to play both of these teams next year. They're going to play them away.
Away.
In Seattle, and they're going to play in Ann Arbor. And
Yeah.
you talk about what could be the old joke, what could be worse than playing both of them next year? How about we're playing them away? That's that's going to be like, whoa. But I don't think it's going to be the same type of Washington team next year that we're seeing.
I think Washington specifically, and I mean, we've got tons of time to do this, but certainly looking at that roster, that team feels like it's taking a step back next year. But Kalen DeBoer is a fantastic coach. I mean, he's certainly proven that this year. The one thing that I think is going to be interesting, when you said Michigan can get after Penix, I think they can too, but I think a lot of teams have thought that they could and then they don't. And Washington they just do not give up sacks, right? I mean, somehow they keep him clean. The one thing that I think is big in this game that probably favors Michigan ultimately is that Jim Harbaugh is not going to go Steve Sarkisian and have his quarterback throw the ball 43 times and try to keep up with Washington's pass attack. Like Blake Corum may run 65 times in this game, and Michigan's going to be just fine with that. I don't think they're going to feel a need to have to go punch for punch with that Washington passing attack. And I think ultimately, when you can play into your own strengths, that's going to help you. And I think that's probably the best thing that Michigan can do. And I think Harbaugh can do that. Sark wanted to throw for throw, and it just never felt like it was going to happen for them. And I think Harbaugh is better about that. So we'll see. Big game Monday night. Gonna be really interesting. And I mean, wouldn't it be something, right? I mean, how many angles has that been covered? The Pac-12 going out potentially as a national champion with Washington there.
And when you think that Washington is going to be in the Big Ten next year, nobody's going to be happier than the commissioner of the Big Ten, because he's just going to say, yeah, well, they're really a Big Ten team. They just happened to play in the last game as a Pac-12 team. So
Yeah.
I'd say that conference is going to be hellacious. And the first 6 teams, it's going to be a dogfight, even with the 12-team playoff team. Somebody's going to get left out of the mix. It's probably going to be pretty good teams.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, let's wrap this up. We'll go to fourth down. So as always, it's going to be kind of your stat, your number, the most important kind of number you're looking at. And again, in this kind of transition off season as we pivot 2023 to 2024
And we're pertaining to USC now,
for
right?
USC. Yep.
Okay, the number I'm looking at probably will be the number 11 because there's 11 players on each side of the line of scrimmage. And when you combine the players that need to be replaced and probably the players that it's going to be probably a total of 11 players at least combined on offense and defense that may have not even been a factor last year. So how much is that going to change? We don't even know what's going to happen in the second window of the transfer portal. And I don't mean just players coming to SC. I'm talking about players that could be leaving SC because as soon as the quote depth chart looks like it looks, there's not going to be any hesitation. And obviously there are schools out there that are going to say, that's all right. You're doing well at SC. We can double what you're getting in the NIL. How do you think about those apples? And I think in this day and age, it's like a miniature NFL, free agency. I'm going to where they're going to be the money, and like one player, I'll say it. I'm not trying to jinx it, but you look at Makai Lemon, his closest buddy, best friend is transferred to Boise State. We're talking about Malachi Nelson. And we may not know until May when the transfer portal opens up again exactly if Malachi Nelson is going to make a break with his best friend since I think it's Pop Warner days. That's going to be a big heavy lift, but that would increase that number that I gave you 11 because I think they anticipate Lemon probably being a starter in a 4 receiver set. It's going to be really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, guessing what the roster looks like now. I mean, 4 months out, two weeks out ahead of transfer portal stuff is kind of crazy. So mine, I'm gonna say two. Two is my number. I think USC still needs to add two kind of game-changing interior defensive linemen to feel really good about the roster going in. Again, you need bodies at wide receiver. I think you can fill that in, and probably an elite guy out there would be great. But again, to get done what you want to get done and to make kind of an impact against this schedule in the Big Ten right away, control games a little bit, still feels like you need to add more along with Bear Alexander in the interior of that defensive line. And that's in addition to the guys that you have stepping up and maturing and being able to make an impact. Right now, Nate Clifton from Vanderbilt is the one defensive lineman coming over in the transfer portal. He's played inside and outside. I don't know where he winds up at USC. It seemed like just kind of watching film, more comfortable maybe on the edge, but certainly a guy maybe that could give you some snaps on the interior. But those big bodies, and I don't think they need to be 380-pound, Easter Island statues to sit in front of the center, but you need some big guys in there where you can rotate. It's not a surprise, right, that every national champion winner and all these playoff teams you go through and there's a couple guys in the middle that just change the game, can get after the quarterback, can stop the run, can control it. You talked about that inside linebacker spot. Boy, could you make it easier on those guys by filling in those gaps in front of them. When you look at that the UCLA defense last year, especially how those edge guys were able to just pile up sacks and impact plays. UCLA had those two big, gigantic defensive tackles in there and could rotate, 2, 3, 4 of them in. I think that's still a key. And again, you don't need them right now because there's a second transfer portal, but I think that's going to be big just to to feel really good about that side of the ball and just about the roster composition moving forward. I think that's going to be a really interesting spot to look. Still pieces to add at a lot of different positions, but boy, does that one feels like a need still at this point. So we'll see how that goes. Again, interested to watch this natural championship game and extremely interested to see how this offseason plays out with a few new additions on that defensive coaching staff, some transfer portal ins and outs. Going to be fascinating to watch all the way until kind of late January is sort of when that last day to add classes at USC, and we, going back 2 years, Caleb Williams was like the last second that you could do it in late January. So still some names potentially coming in. The transfer portal for underclassmen will open again late spring, and we'll see when USC announces when that spring ball starts. But a lot of optimism, I think, for next year. Some trepidation about schedule and what does that roster ultimately look like, but it should be another fun season. Can't wait to see kind of what this offseason brings. So for Greg Katz, this is Erik McKinney. Thanks for watching WeAreSC. Thanks for watching Four Downs.